Oh, now it is. Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Hello, and welcome to the Drupal usability meeting for July 16th, 2019. I'm Benji Fisher, trying to run the show. And we have Adam and Aubrey, Jacob, Sean, and Thomas on the meeting. And I guess I would like to start with an update of issue 245.8127. So let me share my screen. This is one that first was discussed at a usability meeting a year and a half or 2 years ago. We talked about it some more 2 weeks ago. So I guess scrolling to the top. Quick review on the Manage Fields tab. We have this column called Field Settings. It is a link which is redundant because the same link is available as one of the options under the drop button. And it just shows the field type. And especially when it's an entity reference, we'd like to have some additional information, not just know that it's an entity reference, but is it referencing nodes or taxonomy terms or user or something else. And the patch proposes to remove the link and add some information. So we provide a framework where field plugins can provide additional information, and then we implement that framework as a starting point for the entity reference type. So entity references will tell you what type of entity they're referencing. So when we discussed this 2 weeks ago, the main objection we had was that there were some hard-coded bold tags in this title here. And we'd rather have some CSS classes so that teams can decide how to style it. And we'd like the default styling to be that any additional lines will be in a smaller font rather than have it show up as bold. And so I've implemented that. And I think if we scroll to the bottom and look at the screenshots, this is how the Manage Fields tab now looks. It's the difference in font size is a little bit subtle, but it's the same 1.0, 0.9 difference that we have between the two columns on the Manage. Is it Form Display or Manage Display? I think it's the Manage Display tab. But anyway, it's the same difference we have there. The field list page also gets an additional column. And I think I also put in a screenshot, showing what the markup looks like. So on the table entry, I've added a class. And then the two pieces used to be separated. Two pieces used to be pasted together with line breaks, which makes it hard to apply a class to one of them but not the other. So I decided the best way to do it was to make it an item list. So we have the item list, formatting, unordered list, two list items, and then I've attached CSS so that every list item gets a smaller font size, 0.9em, and then I override that for the first list item. Here we go, overriding it for the first list item. We go back to font size 1.0em. So how do people like that solution?
I like the solution. One thing I can totally see coming is Lowry being like, we should apply BEM classes on those list items rather than rely on the actual structure of the markup. So he will probably come back with that. So I would maybe recommend doing that. But like as I said before, I like the solution on its own merits.
Yeah, I agree with the BEM classes. I saw an example. I'm looking at the themes, and it's kind of, if you look at the theme summary page, you'll get a larger title font and then a smaller description, and it's using, BEM class, which would be like theme info underscore header, and then theme underscore underscore header, and then the smaller description is theme dash info underscore underscore description. So yeah, I think that's easier to style and easier for people to control in their own custom theme admin themes.
So both for my sake and for the sake of the recording, Jacob, could you share your screen and show us the markup you're looking at?
Yeah. Yes, I was just juggling. So it's on this page. You guys can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So and let's look at this one, because I think this is closer to what we're after. If we inspect element, and I'll try to make this bigger. That's the header, H3, and then a description. I'm not, if you note how it's styled, it doesn't actually, it cares about the header. It uses that as the font size, making it slightly bigger. But I think we want classes like that. And I would just do them on divs. I wouldn't put a header in there.
And you would just use divs rather than an item list?
Yeah, because people are going to style that The problem with that is people are going to style the item list, the UL differently per admin theme. So we'll get slightly unexpected results. A great example of an item list is they'll probably put margins at the end of the item list or inside the items. That would be unexpected.
Yeah, I imagine that will happen as well.
That's true. One of the things I did, I noticed that when I changed the font size, that changed the margins. So I ended up setting margin 0 on my item lists. But I guess I wouldn't have that problem if I was not using an item list. So thanks for that advice. So I guess this still needs some work, and that's going to involve changing how the information is passed around. But I'll see what I can do. Any other comments on this?
Not for me. I think it should go to the framework managers, honestly.
Even before I update the markup?
Yeah. The markup is more the domain of Lowry, the one front-end framework manager, but the back-end changes are probably going to need framework manager sign-off. So, and those I've looked at and they look okay to me. So I would probably just send them along to the framework managers at this point.
Okay. Well, thank you. Good. I think that's enough on this issue. Who would like to go next? Sean, Adam?
Yeah. I think we would love to have the next slot. So I have two issues I'd like to talk about. I'll discuss the one that Sean is concerned with first, because he is in the Netherlands and I don't know what time at night there. So let me share my screen. Can everybody see my screen now? Or no, whoa, we're incepting, dude. Jacob, I think you have to unshare yours.
No, you just have to.
Oh, it's me. I have to unshare. Okay, are we seeing my actual screen now?
I now see spy stuff.
What I actually care about. Cool. So this is not the issue we care about. But anyway, so we discussed this in the last UX call, I think, where the issue in question is that it is possible in a limited cardinality media field, in this case, one that has only 3 media items allowed.
Adam, can you give us the issue number?
Oh, yeah, of course. It's 3059955. And the problem, just to recap here, is if you have a media field that only allows 3 things, it's possible to select 2 that are already existing, for example. Let's do that. And then, you can upload multiple at once and overflow the number of things. And this causes a problem normally, where it just kind of breaks a whole bunch of ways. So this is with Sean's patch applied, where it will try to inform you what's going on. It'll prevent you from directly inserting into the entity reference field and sort of, here we go, sloth1, hedgy, and it'll try to sort of make you go back and remove something so that you're actually using the appropriate number of things. So this is a little bit different from, this is, I think, slightly different, though, from what we had originally discussed. Sean's concern, which I don't know if we're equipped to address on this call, is that this could be an accessibility, troublesome from an accessibility standpoint, from disabling the, so when I upload stuff, you can see that, I get the save and insert button, and if I've overflown the number of things, this button is disabled. So that's a potential thing. That's a potential concern from an accessibility standpoint. But since we have no accessibility experts on this call, I figure it's not something we have to talk about right now.
I think Andrew was on his way.
Oh, he was?
So hopefully he will be able to join us in a couple of moments.
Yeah, hopefully he does, and if he does, cool.
Yeah.
If not, what do we have any opinions about the solution from a usability standpoint? And helpfully, I have Sean recorded a video of this, which is posted in the latest, along with the latest patch in that issue, so that we can go over this whole flow over and over without me having to do it. But yeah, any thoughts about this?
I actually am dealing with something similar in web form because there's file uploads and then there's limitations on it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about the background noise. And so there's a discrepancy. Like web form did exactly what you're doing here, where it let them upload the files, but wouldn't let them submit the form. So they get a validation error. There's 5 files attached. You can't have 5 files. You can only have 3. But then someone filed an issue, and in core, the decision with file upload, the file element, is it truncated?
Yes.
And I am implementing that because I see, how'd you put it, that workflow of truncating is just very matter of fact. It's like, you're only allowed 3. That's the end of the story. Cut it off. Tell them that you did it and keep on moving.
Yeah.
That does get around any accessibility or confusions because it's a pretty simple thing. They made a mistake. They get an error, but it doesn't like stop their workflow.
Right.
But we're losing data. But we're not, you know what I mean? We're not really, not
it's
allowing.
It's not really data loss if they can just go back and re-upload in a minute.
Yeah. So I'm on the fence on it. I see the benefits of both. I do see this, the truncating is just a simpler workflow. And if there's accessibility issues being created by this workflow, maybe truncating it would be easier.
I think truncating it would be easier in almost every way, certainly from an implementation standpoint. Sean, correct me if I'm wrong about that.
Well, the implementation of the is just a different moment, basically. So we already have the JavaScript to show the message. Mm-hmm. So we already know at that point if you made a mistake or not. And so having the buttons disabled is only one line of code. And doing the truncating after you click insert, mm-hmm. and then showing an extra message would basically be a lot more that we need to check, and it's a different point in the code. So I think this implementation is simpler, but since Andrew is now here, I would love to hear his thoughts on the matter.
Yeah. So does anybody else have thoughts about whether this is preferable to truncation or if truncation is preferable to this? One thing that truncation has going for it is the fact that it is an existing pattern in core. Because as you just pointed out, the file upload, like normal file uploads and image fields do exactly that. They just truncate. So if we did that, we'd be following that pattern. This is maybe a little bit more gracious, but, it sounds like we can't really make too much of a decision here without accessibility input, because that seems to be the thing that's going to make or break this. That's the impression I'm getting.
Okay. I was looking at the at the issue. Hi. I was looking at the issue, and this is the media dialogue and too many items, right?
Yes, it's when you've overflown the number of things you can actually put in there. So the difference, what we have right now, is it grays out the save and insert button, so that you're basically forced to go back to, here and unselect a few things.
Yeah. So I went to the issue. I've already dropped a comment on the issue, and I was trying it out before coming here, and then I lost track of time. There's two things going on. Three things going on. There's the way that the checkboxes behave, so that the checkboxes become disabled once you've got too many things. Then there's the message that you get. Currently, we've got this yellow one, and then there's the disabled button. And of those, and we've also got the message at the bottom, 6 of 5. Correct me if I'm wrong. That 6 of 5 items is a live region, isn't it?
I believe so. Sean, can you confirm that?
Could you repeat the question, please?
In the bottom right-hand corner where it says 6 of 5, that's right. Did we get round to implementing that as an ARIA live region?
Correct.
We did, right? Good.
Yes.
So that's kind of cool. So that 6 of 5 is going to get announced when it ticks over to that number. The yellow error message, that should be announced. That one I've heard, just Sean on Slack just told me that we implemented that with the JavaScript message API.
I think that doesn't the JavaScript message API support announce?
Yes, it gets announced.
Either way, whether it's a JS or Ajax server side, it doesn't really matter. We've got Drupal announce support for that. If it's a JS message API, that's got an announce call built in. And if it was server side, we've got an Ajax announce command we can use. So that's covered either way. The troublesome issue is disabled buttons. The disabled buttons are a bit of a bugbear in general. They've got numerous usability and accessibility problems, which are fairly well documented. We can find some links on that around the web. But the gist of it is that people don't notice there's a disabled button. Either the button does have sufficient contrast to be readable, in which case it typically doesn't have sufficient difference between an enabled and disabled state. Or they've gone for the more extreme appearance where you have a very low contrast on the disabled button. And then sometimes people don't realize there's a button there at all. In the 7 theme, we've gone for a fairly clear to read text. But like, if you're in the movie that's on the it'd be if we go back to about 38 seconds.
Yeah, I can do just that.
Right. So in this situation where we have that disabled button, there we've got an save and select is enabled and save and insert is disabled. And I don't think that's conveyed visually, because the differences are that save and insert, if we go to about 45 seconds or so, you see it change. Yeah, that's what we see. The color changes, it gets a stronger border, it gets bold text. But you don't ever see, when it's disabled, you can't tell the difference. You can't tell that you don't know whether it's, you might spot the fact that it's only got a lighter font weight, but you wouldn't necessarily pick up that that's because it's a disabled button, because the thing you've got it next to is a big prominent blue primary button, and you don't know whether the difference is because it's disabled or just because
that makes
it's
sense.
Secondary. That
makes sense.
There is a button visible in the background there, add media, on the underlying page, one that launched the dialogue. But the trouble with that is it's partly obscured by the grey overlay that surrounds the area outside the dialogue. So again, its true appearance isn't really there to compare with. So on the whole, I'm not a fan of disabled buttons. There is a bigger issue with disabled buttons for screen readers, which is that any disabled form element and that includes buttons, they are not, they're omitted. The screen reader user doesn't know where the button is when their screen reader is in the forms mode. Screen readers on Windows are different to screen readers on Mac and Android. Screen readers on Windows have got like two modes, where you've got a mode for quickly jumping around interactive controls in a form, and you've got a mode for kind of reading the whole page. And what happens is when you get to a dialogue like this, and you get in, most likely you're focused on a form element, the screen reader will immediately jump to the forms mode. And when they're in there, you'll get a tab around and you won't find a disabled button. So if we're at the later stage of sort of like around about 50 seconds where we've got just one button, we wouldn't see a screen reader user will miss the insert selected button.
So basically disabling it and re-enabling it makes things very unclear.
Yeah,
for screen readers. Okay,
that's right. We did look at whether there were any other disabled buttons in Core, and we know of two, but they're a very different situation to this. They don't they don't start disabled and then become enabled. They
from that perspective, then, two questions come to mind for me. Would just removing the button outright, if it's invalid, be preferable to that, where you have to go to save and select? The only problem with that being it's a UX WTF. Or would maybe just truncating the additional upload things, which is consistent with other things in Core, do the trick? Because then we don't have to mess with the buttons at all.
I think not messing with the buttons in any way is a good idea. I think the problem of disabled buttons have got these general problems. I think they might be compounded when they're on a dialogue as well. I think if you couldn't find a submit button, there's a good chance a screen reader user might just not understand how they can complete the dialogue. And then they would have to just abort it by pressing close. But taking the button out, I mean, what would happen? Would we take the button out, and I'm not sure whether a dynamically appearing button is any easier to follow.
I mean,
that
my
could
suggestion
potentially lead to like a keyboard trap, that the only way to exit the dialogue would be the close button. And that's what we definitely don't want.
Yeah, that's not a keyboard trap. You can at least get out of it. What you'd get to, a keyboard trap is, that's not what a keyboard trap is.
Okay, I'm sorry. But you do get kind of stuck.
Close is fine. That's not a keyboard trap.
Okay.
Not being able to complete a dialogue is more of a it's a usability problem, which might impact some users more than others, but it's not a keyboard trap.
I wonder, would it make things any better if the message, instead of being at the top of the dialogue, were next to the buttons, whether the buttons are enabled or not?
For screen reader users, not much, because remember it's being echoed to Drupal announce as well. But in the Slack channel, I hope I got to check his name, Andrew Nevins, I think. Andrew Nevins in the accessibility channel raises a really good point, which is that if you're using this with a screen magnifier, the disabled button and the reason it's disabled are nowhere in proximity with each other. So moving the message might be a good idea.
Can I weigh in a little bit? The message is really long, so it's possible to have two. Just to back up, the issue with the disabled is we don't want disabled buttons. So let's say we had it enabled, and when I'm going to go at very low fidelity. Someone clicks the save and insert, and they can't complete the task. We display an error message. If you displayed an alert box, it would work well with screen readers because it would block them from continuing forward, tell them exactly what the issue is, and force them to correct it. We don't want to do an alert box, but we could block it from submitting and display like a red message right next to save and insert to say, please delete some items, and that could be read aloud.
That's a very good point, and it's actually a change of timing as well, because what we've kind of got here is we've got this yellow message that just appears at some point whilst you're interacting with the dialogue content, but it's relevant at the time when you want to hit the save and insert button. So that there's a timing difference between when that message appears and when you actually need to know it. Whereas the idea we've just heard of, let's have the enabled button and let them go ahead and press the enabled button, and then let's give them a red error message. That eliminates the time gap. You've got a red error message which has appeared as a direct response to pressing that button. So there's
but the warning appears because you've uploaded too many files.
Yeah.
Well, the warning appears under those circumstances, but really what the warning is talking about is the fact that you've selected too many things. You have too many things in your shopping cart, basically. And so that's kind of, I kind of like the idea of let them click the button and be like, oh, there's too many things here. Because that's the actual problem. It's like the fact that they can't get to that point by just choosing existing items is almost sort of incidental. If that was possible, they would have they'd be in the same boat.
But wouldn't it make sense to show the message at the moment where you made the mistake?
They're not mutually exclusive, mind. You can have a sort of little warning message, this is going to bite you later. And then when you hit the button, then it really does bite you and you get a red message.
Kind of like that.
Yeah, so we could keep the warning and then also have a hard error if you try to save and select or save and insert with too many things in your shopping cart.
Save and select should not be a problem, because then you would still see the warning. Because at that point, it's you haven't actually tried to insert it yet. So but only if you try to insert it, that's the moment where you get like the hard error.
So just to clarify, so we get, I mean, I think it could be the same error just turned red, and you do have to scroll to the top. You know, for people, it scrolls to the top. That orange yellow error turns red. It's actually read more strongly. It's read stronger, right? If it's an error message versus a warning. I don't know if the tone of the screen reader changes, but I'm not sure how Core's dealing with that.
The screen reader won't change tone. I think the way the JavaScript API works is we use ARIA Live as polite if it's a success message, but we're using assertive for the yellow and the red. So it won't change.
So
yeah, the priority is part
it
of
will
the
be repeated. So
sorry. I was just saying that the announce command has a priority built in, so it should do something different. It's polite or assertive, yeah. Depending on
the JavaScript one is going to use assertive for the we should really be using. The thing is that the polite and assertive, don't get hung up on that, because the implementation in browsers and screen readers is still flaky. There's no guarantee that assertive will be treated as assertive.
So it sounds like the strong recommendation is not to disable the button. And then there's a suggestion of putting the message closer to the buttons. And if the button is not disabled, then we have to have an error message if someone tries to insert when there are too many items selected.
That's what I am getting from this. So it sounds so basically what I'm sort of thinking needs to change here is basically remove any kind of button disabling stuff. Then if you upload some number of things, it's going to overflow your maximum. Show an error show a warning, and show it below the show it directly above the buttons. where it makes more sense. And then if you click either button with the intent to insert into the field, which really is just, I guess, save and select or whatever, or save and insert, then that warning changes to an error. And you can't close the dialog until you've deselected something.
Yeah, I have two questions. That's also how I understood it, but I have two questions with this. And that's moving this error message or warning to another place.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Since we don't know how long the form is going to be, it could be that the error message, then we have to put it in the same region as the buttons and the 6 of 5 items selected.
The other one
would
thing
make
about
the dialogue lots smaller. Yeah, sorry.
One thing that occurs to me about moving it above the buttons is I don't even know how we're going to do that, because as far as I know, that is not an existing pattern in core, which maybe complicates things a little bit.
The pattern would be that you scroll to the message. I mean, that's like, if there's Ajax enabled, it scrolls up to the error message.
Mm-hmm.
We're missing something here because we're very focused on, screen readers. I got to throw out, someone clicks a button, we scroll to the error message. If the error message isn't scrolled to, then we're not really showing, we're not giving a sighted person a visual cue that the pressing of the button failed. We just have to think about, like, I've seen other sites where the button shakes if you can't submit it as a warning, visual, like, this isn't going to work as you expect.
Ooh, let's do that.
Well, we have to give some cue. We have to say, this button's not working. And I'm not, shaking is the one I've seen. You could flash it red. You could put a red message next to it.
This actually leads to my second point I wanted to make, because when you click save and insert and we leave the button enabled, then we are technically able to save the form. So we can already insert the media items. So would we then expect to stay on this form and show the error message here? Or would we save the media items and show the error message on the save and select page, where we just have the 6 items selected, and at the top, the media items are saved, but they can't be inserted. Please remove one or something.
Can you forward to that screen? I think, sorry, Adam. Just
which screen?
Just the save and select screen. We have that screen in this, right?
But once you click save and select, you go here. I would honestly move it here. I would go back to save and select, where it's like, okay, you need to deselect some shit.
Yes.
I like that.
Yeah.
Because then you go to a new screen, and at the top here, this message should be red. Like when you click save and select, it's still warning, but when you click save and insert, then we actually show a red message. And when you click insert,
I wouldn't show this one as red.
Sorry?
I wouldn't show this one as red until you click the insert selected.
Well, in the previous step, we have 2 buttons. We have save and select, which the save and select button always returns you to the previous screen.
Yeah.
But the save and insert would normally close the dialog. But when we can't close the dialog because you have too many items selected, we can do either two things. We can stay on this page where you added the alternative text and stuff and add the red message on top of this one. Or we can save the media items already, because we are technically able to save them. And then instead of closing the dialog, we return you to the selection page and show a red message there that we were able to save the media items. We're not able to insert them yet, because you have selected too many.
A red message on the underlying page after the dialog has disappeared. Yeah, that would work.
I'm sorry, what about this after the dialog has disappeared? I don't think the idea is to, I think the idea here is not to close the dialog until everything is hunky-dory.
Yeah.
Right, so the suggestion, I think, is that the 2 buttons would behave in the same way and take you to the next screen in the dialog.
Correct. That's my understanding of it. And the reason I like that idea actually is because it gives some reassurance that, hey, the things you just uploaded, we saved those, because they'll show up at the top of the media library. So it's like, okay, we saved those things. You're all good now. You're all good with those, but you can't bring all of these into your form. You can't select all of these right now. So that's why I like that one personally, but that's just my opinion.
I like it too.
Okay. So it sounds like we have agreement. We have some level of consensus. So I guess I will summarize all this on the issue.
If we
probably
do
tomorrow morning.
that, do we need this warning message at all?
I think we should have the warning message because it's an early warning that wait, something is a little bit awry here. So what's cool about this is it says, okay, you've overflown, but I'm still going to let you enter all. I'm still going to let you finish your upload. You know, so I'm not super mad at you yet, but I'm going to be mad at you if you don't deselect something. So I like the early warning personally.
I have one minor thing that I wanted to mention. I've been struggling to think of how I would suggest fixing it. I don't know. I worry that the 6 of 5 items selected would be read as a bug by most users. It's not really clear or connected to everything else that's going on. So it could be read that, oh, you need 6 things now and yada, yada, yada. So it's just the way it can read.
We actually have an issue open, or there's an active issue to improve that text. It's not a stable blocker, but it is definitely something. I think it's on the roadmap for Media Library.
And this text has come up a lot of times.
Yeah, that
Because
text has been very contentious.
The 1 of 3 items selected, people have mistakenly thought there were only 3 items in the library, or that it's confusing what the numbers mean. Apparently.
Yeah. So I think that sounds to me like something we should probably solve in the other issue where we need to figure out how exactly to phrase this bullshit.
Agreed. I know it just was confusing me, and I didn't want to not mention it. But that's
that's 100% that's 100% legit.
I agree.
Just something else I'd like to say, which is that the solutions we've discussed don't all have to be done at once in the same issue. Like, to me, the biggest issue is stop using these disabled buttons. The idea about moving the message down somewhere else nearer to the buttons, that could be done as a follow-up.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, that we can split this.
I agree with that. I think that getting the validation right is the most important thing, and I think that that's important also because currently you can actually wander directly into completely broken behavior. So preventing that is top priority, and then we can, moving things around, I think, is more finessing it, which we can do later. So +1 to that.
Yeah, the people who benefit from moving that message will be magnifier users.
Okay.
Because of the proximity to the action.
That makes sense. Okay, so I think that this all sounds pretty good, and I guess I will summarize it in the issue tomorrow. I would do it tonight, but my laptop is in the shop following a tea spill. So I'll summarize that on the issue, and we'll hopefully have it demoable for the next UX call.
I will try. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everybody, for that one. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about had to do with, so as you may or may not be aware, we now have the ability to, we have a text filter in core that allows you to embed media items in a WYSIWYG. The problem is it's just a text filter. There's no UI for it yet. So to embed things, you have to write your embed code manually. That kind of sucks, but that's not what we're talking about just yet. The problem comes if you've
Adam,
embedded.
can you give us an issue number?
Oh yeah, sorry, I keep forgetting. 2994696.
Thank you.
Now the problem, as I understand it, or the question, it's not really a problem, it's a question that needs resolving, is here's this thing, it's been embedded, and let's say somebody goes and deletes it. That video is fascinating, by the way. I highly recommend it for people. This is what it looks like in the current generation of the patch. When that happens, you just get this Ghostbusters logo. And, oh, I'm sorry, apparently I don't get just the Ghostbusters logo. I get something. I don't know how that's working. I'll have to talk to Wim. But I think the question that we had, so first of all, we just had this image with just the Ghostbusters logo, and it has an alt, I think, of missing media, which from an accessibility standpoint, we figured was fine since there's an alt. But from a UX standpoint, it kind of sucks because without this missing media here, you just get this Ghostbusters logo, and it's not clear what happened or why, unless you go check the reports, unless you go check the watchdog log, which not everybody can do or will think to do. So we want to add this this text here, I guess, down below. And I guess the question is, what do you guys think about this from a UX standpoint, from an accessibility standpoint, particularly the use of ARIA hidden on this one, so that it doesn't repeat itself, where it's like image missing media. And yeah, that's those are the questions that we have. Any thoughts?
Am I allowed to be completely honest?
Yes.
Okay. I think I find this so frustrating because when you face this issue that's like a really big error, like no one wants this on the live site.
Naturally.
That I think we need to, someone who can edit this node with this error should have a link to say, edit this node, remove this media, like fix this, like give them guidance, not just say missing media.
Mm-hmm.
And we should detect the two use cases, someone who can fix a problem and someone who can't fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my first takeaway on this is like, when there's a problem and someone has the ability to fix it, guide them to fix it.
That's a great idea.
Okay, but with that, I'm on the fence because I know if I on a client project, when I've ran into this issue, I don't show the message. Like if an image is broken, don't show the broken image. I know that's kind of dicey, I've done other things and displayed it and put a comment in that in the source that says this media is missing. It's just, it looks really awkward on someone's site to have a giant X.
So one option, I guess, that we certainly have, this, I think Wim pushed back on this, but if, UX says it's like, one thing is like in the editor itself, we would, and I don't know why it like actually shows the preview. It's not supposed to, oh, what the fuck? Yeah. Oh, there you go. That's what I'm supposed to see. So in the editor, we do want to show this, I think, because we should make editors aware that this is not, that it's not here, and we give them the opportunity to delete it and re-embed something. So I think this is appropriate for the editor, but then for the, for the actual rendered thing, we would have to make, what was the complaint? Or like my feeling was also like, yeah, why don't we just hide it in the final rendered thing, but show this as it is in the editor. And maybe if you have, in the final rendered thing, if you have permission to edit media, although it would need that, the problem there, of course, is you need to have like, or if you have permission to edit the thing to which the text is attached, show a link that says there's missing media here, fix it, click here to fix it.
So I had a quick question about the view page. Wouldn't it make sense, since we've done the pattern elsewhere, to have a warning that says missing X number of media from a particular node? And that way it would be more clear, but it wouldn't necessarily insert something that people would have to theme or provide, or we're putting in a default that doesn't look good. It would behave in a way that's more, I guess people are used to, but then we'd be giving the warning, and we'd be like with a large node or with a lot of content, it'd allow people to actually know, okay, there's multiple things missing.
Right.
But this brings up a corollary for me, which is if we are tracking missing media, wouldn't it make sense in the media, wherever the media browser is managing stuff, to have a dashboard that shows media that is being referenced and missing, so that an editor or someone managing media would be able to see everything that's being referenced?
It would make sense if we were tracking these things, but we ain't tracking shit.
Okay.
So that's
Understood.
not going to work.
Yep. Okay. So then retract that.
Yeah. But yes, if we were tracking things, that would be an amazing idea. 100%. So, I mean, I guess the question that we have here is like, there's no clear sense of what we should do about this. You know, again, in the editor, it seems like this, I think, does anybody have objections to this in the editor?
I don't, but I personally would like there to be a validation error when this happens. So if someone goes and hits submit, I would like it to say there's missing media. Please correct this before you can submit the form.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's a very strict way to handle it, or it can be a configuration setting, but I know my content editors would want to know. They wouldn't want someone to be able to submit a form with a broken image, nor would they want it to have a broken media file, media reference.
Yeah, I mean, potentially that might be more, honestly, I kind of feel like that would be follow-up material because it introduces certain complexities, like implementation complexities around the input filter. So possibly delegating that to a follow-up, or even to contrib, but
I could live with that.
Yeah, we might have to do something like that. But like just as this looks and feels to you in the editor, even without validation. I mean, I'm not hearing any real problems with this as being a thing that only shows up for editors, so they can at least tell where the missing media are. But then, yeah, it's the view stuff that's more contentious because it's just not clear what we should do.
Would you put more of a message in the editor one instead of it just saying missing media? Would you put that report message that you said was there? Like, would you build it out a little bit, or would that be too much noise in the editor?
I think that we could put more information there if we wanted. I'm just not sure what information we would put there. Because here's the thing, right? It's like all we know in the text filter is like, okay, we know there's supposed to be a media and it's supposed to have this UUID, but if it doesn't exist, we can't get a hold of it. So we have no idea what kind of media it was or what it was called or anything like that. All we really know is like whatever alt text you may have assigned to it, which you might not have. So it's hard to say what exactly we would put there.
But in the editor, you could guide them to the two tasks of either removing or replacing the media. So you'd have an X or a plus icons, which you already have those set up for embedded media in the editor, right?
No, we don't yet, because that's not happening in this issue. That's happening in, I think, the next issue in the chain.
Okay.
I mean, in theory, we could do something like that, but you don't really edit an embed as you would delete it and replace it.
Okay, so maybe just an X to make it easy for them to delete it, because that's the only thing they could do to remedy this.
Right, they would have to delete it and put another one in completely.
For entity reference fields, if I'm not mistaken, which could have the same issue, I think it just gets removed automatically, right? So you don't see anything on the view page, and when you edit the thing, you just get an empty row in your selection field, right? Or in your entity reference field.
That is correct.
So it doesn't show you any errors. It doesn't show anything on the view page, and it would just hide stuff that's no longer there. Isn't that a pattern we could also apply to this field?
I mean, we could potentially do something like that. I question whether that would be desirable to an editor, in the sense that the entity references are like, this is a list of things that it's a list. It's very, very, like an entity reference thing feels quite a bit more structured to me anyway than a WYSIWYG. And a WYSIWYG is like, I put that in there, now the system messed with it and something is gone. So I feel like that, like this, like just removing it silently from the editor is going to feel more like straight up data loss or a bug, than something legitimately gone and put in the trash can.
Yeah,
but I could be totally wrong about that.
As a site builder, that would be pretty frustrating to have to deal with. I can understand how that might be less disruptive to content that is being shown publicly. So not putting something that you don't want the world to see might be what you want to see in the end content, but without a warning or without some way of knowing that stuff is missing, and especially without any reporting features or tracking of that information, it could make a large content site virtually unmanageable.
Well, my personal feeling is that where the real error happens is something is deleted that should not be deleted in the first place because it's used, and that could be solved by adding tracking of the media and usage.
I just heard 1,000 release managers cry out in agony as if somebody suggested entity tracking going to
No, well, it's a hard problem to solve, but it is the correct way to solve this. And until we have that, there is a potential for embedded stuff, whether it's in a WYSIWYG or an entity reference field, to be deleted by somebody else who doesn't even know you're using it. Then the next issue is are you going to make a mistake somebody else made a problem of other editors? And do they have to actually manually go and delete that stuff or replace it or whatever? That's something I'm struggling with personally, because especially if you have I don't know, media editors who are different people than the ones that are actually managing the content. Every time an image gets deleted and you have to go back and fix 16 articles,
right.
that also sounds like a huge task to put on people.
I tend to agree. I think where I'm standing with this stuff is we need to deliver this feature in 8.8, the ability to embed media into WYSIWYG. Dealing with deleted stuff doesn't have to be super elegant, especially for precisely the reasons you said, Sean, that entity tracking would help a lot, but we don't have it. And we are not going to have it anytime soon. So I think what I'm thinking is like, what's the minimum we could do that would be I guess what I'm going for is like whatever's the easiest and least frustrating thing we could do short of having entity tracking in core.
Well, when you delete it, if it just made a log of it and said at the time of deletion, these nodes had contained references to this media, which makes sense.
Right, except that that would require entity tracking, which we don't have.
Well, you can't. The media doesn't know where it's being used at all. Is what you're saying? Okay.
Only in entity reference fields would it have a hope of knowing that. In these WYSIWYGs, it has no idea.
Okay, it's similar to the problem of content owned by users when users are deleted. So it's a similar pattern.
Sort of, except that's a little bit different. Where it's like I know this was owned by someone at some point, but now it's owned by anonymous. But it's still a structured reference. Whereas WYSIWYG stuff is this jumble of text,
I think this is more comparable to somebody making a link in a WYSIWYG field to a node, and then the node gets deleted.
Right, that's much more what it's like.
So I get the tracking entity references is incredibly a pain in the neck. Yeah, I mean media references. We could. I mean, this is an MVP solution, Adam. This is like
this is a what?
MVP? An MVP, like a minimally way to better handle this is when a media entity is deleted. The entity is deleted, but we have a table that we keep track of the UUID of the media entity with a message that's like what was the media that was deleted, so that we have a table to look up when we get to this situation, because we do have a UUID for this media that's been deleted, and we can say verbosely, hey, the video that was here called blah, blah, blah was deleted. I mean, that's just like trying to make this a little better without a huge overhead.
Yeah, that could potentially be that might be a pretty decent solution. I think that could potentially work. It would also be something we could easily do in Contrib, which we could do before 8.8 too, where it's like, and here's the thing, we could have, we already log a message if we can't load the media, and it goes into Watchdog. So we could easily have a Contrib module that recorded the UUIDs and names of deleted media items, so that you could tell this. you know, and sort of cross-reference it together.
No, I agree with you on the contrib. That makes sense. Is there? We don't have trash bin set up. That's out of scope these days because the other way to do this is you don't ever delete media. You just hide it.
Right. Yeah, that's not a thing right now, as far as I know.
Well, isn't that kind of what you're doing? Like if you don't show anything to the user, at least in the viewed tab, that's just hiding it. But on the edit page, it's like it does a content editor. You probably want to know, but how do you display that to them? Do you show a message when they go edit it, or do you already show a message when you view it? What would be the correct place to show a message to the editors?
I mean, I would probably, my knee-jerk opinion there is show it when they are accessing the item that's going to be affected by this stuff. So if they're looking at the node at all and they have permission to edit, then they should see a warning. If they go to the edit form, which means they have permission to edit, they should see the warning.
So the view and edit tab could both have a message that
right.
this piece of content uses a deleted media. And
potentially, yeah.
And we could probably then also tell them which field it is, especially because I've seen sites with literally dozens of fields.
I think that might potentially be tricky. I'm not sure, but possible.
Because if you don't know what field it is, then
right,
the message could very well not be helpful at all.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're almost out of time. So let me sort of summarize my takeaways here. It sounds to me like on the view tab, like on the edit tab, things are pretty much fine. On the view tab, or on the edit tab, things are mostly fine, except maybe a little bit more information in the message about what to do. On the view tab, it would be better to just show nothing, but for privileged users, set a message that says, hey, there's some missing stuff in here, and you should go edit it to fix it.
I know we're out of time, and you're going to hate me backtracking on that, hiding the mixed media, but now I'm thinking, what if there's a layout that relies on media, and it's like a very fixed layout, and there's this media that's holding that layout open?
A layout that's in WYSIWYG?
Well, no, like WYSIWYG sets up a node, it embeds media. Like, I'm just thinking if we just take the media out, it could cause unpredictable layouts. Like, it could change the way the page is looking. I'm just, you know what? I think it's too extreme.
But that it's more true for entity reference fields, though. If you use Layout Builder and have an entity reference field in the 2-column setup, and all the media in your entity reference fields gets deleted.
I mean, I also think that's a little bit, that's maybe more on the edge casey side of things.
Okay, so let's stick to the removing of it, and we're going to watchdog log whenever there's.
We already do.
Okay,
we already do that. So yeah, we'll watchdog it, and then somebody, probably me, can whip up a contrib module that just gives that tracks deleted media so that it makes it easier to resolve the problems. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
And do we then show a message on the view and edit tab as well?
Yeah, that was my understanding.
So
okay,
you would generate a report, something like the 404 report.
Yeah, or some kind of reporting that says there's media that we're not, there's deleted media in here somewhere, if we can show that. I'll have to talk to Wim to see if it's even possible for us to do that, but I think the sense I get is that any help we can give content editors, the better, short of putting entity tracking in.
I haven't used the module for years, but back in the day, there was like a broken link tracker contrib module.
Yeah.
Would it be possible just to do something like that during cron jobs, it was able to slowly go through content and just track anything that was missing media?
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
as a contrib module, that's totally doable.
So that would be a simpler solution.
That's that's totally one option.
And we also have the entity usage contrib module, which helps in preventing users from deleting stuff they shouldn't.
Right. So there are some potential avenues here, but as far as what we put into core, I think that's I'll propose that, and it sounds like it's a pretty acceptable solution for MVP. So thank you, everybody. And I'll stop sharing my screen and we can all go home.
Yeah, we are a little over time. Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
I will post to the UX channel once the recording is available, and please add a link to the issues when you update them.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your input.
Yes, thank you.
All right, take
Bye.
care.
Have a good night.
All right, bye.
Goodbye.